Welcome to episode 9 of the Composer Happy Hour presented by Whatever and Ever Amen. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. If you're listening to the audio-only version of the show, I want to remind you that the episode is also available as a video, which is really the best way to be a part of the conversation. You can find the video at buymeacoffee.com/whateverchoir. And if you're enjoying the show, that site is also the spot where you can show your support by buying us a beer. Your beer money contributions help to support future episodes of the podcast. For the second episode in a row, we are being sponsored by the wonderful Four Fires Meadery. They're an incredible meadery located here in Toledo, but their meads are also available for shipping nationwide. I'll be drinking some of their stuff during the episode today, and if you want your own bottle, and trust me, you do, you can visit them at 4fmeadery.com. That's the number 4fmeadery.com. More about them later in the show. My guest for today is Saunder Choi. If you don't already know his music, you're in for a treat. Whether it's his arrangements of folk songs from the Philippines or his searing take on the American experience, Saunder's music has such a sense of honesty and immediacy. Today, we discuss taco trucks, growing up in the Philippines, and flat tires in the desert. If you haven't already, pour yourself a drink. My name is Brad Pearson. My guest today is Saunder Choi, and this is the Composer Happy Hour. Saunder, hello, how are you?
Hey, Brad. Thank you for having me on your podcast. This is very
thanks.
exciting.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited. I mentioned actually before we started recording that you're the first person that I've had on the show that I haven't actually kind of interacted with a little bit beforehand. So it's so nice to officially meet you.
Yeah, and hopefully in person soon after we get through this whole thing.
I feel like that's what we've been saying for so long to everyone about everything. Hopefully soon, hopefully soon, hopefully soon.
I mean, at this point, honestly, and I really want to highlight this for people who are listening out there. At this point, the solution is there, and it's really up to us.
Yeah.
When we want to end this pandemic, right? The solution has been presented.
Yeah.
And it works. So it's up to us.
Well, I suspect most of the folks that are listening to this agree with you, but So what do you have to drink with you today? What did you bring?
Okay, so I made a drink called a Tropicali.
Nice.
So it is rum pineapple juice. So an explanation of this drink is I wanted to represent where I am. And I just happen to like tiki drinks too. The bottom part is tropical because I grew up in the tropics. I grew up in the Philippines. So I found this really nice coconut rum from Tanduay. Tanduay is a Philippine rum brand. And it's called Boracay Tanduay rum. So Boracay is a Philippine island that's famous for its white sand beaches. I like this better than Malibu because it's not sweet. Like Malibu has sugar.
Yeah.
Reason, but this is just like it has the essence of coconut, but it's not sweet. Okay. And then Captain Morgan, pineapple juice, nutmeg, and then I did a red wine float, a Cabernet Sauvignon float on top because I'm in California.
There you go.
I'm calling this the Tropicali.
Nice. Well, that sounds outstanding. Actually, I want one. Well, my drink is pre-made, but no less fantastic. So actually, we have a sponsor for this episode. They sponsored the last episode, and we'll be sponsoring a couple more. But the sponsor is a meadery called Four Fires Meadery. And I don't know. Do you know anything about mead?
I know that it's honey wine. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. But mead has become kind of a really big thing in the beverage industry, kind of growing more and more. And Four Fires is local here in town, but they ship nationwide, and it's really great. This one is called Little Pink Lawn Chair. And it is, I'm going to read this because I don't want to mess it up, but it is a raspberry, strawberry, and lemon honey wine. but it is basically designed to taste kind of like a pink lemonade for the summer. So it is 14% alcohol and pretty sweet, but really, really nice. So
Have you
that's what I'm
tried
doing.
it yet? Does it taste like lemonade?
Yeah, it does. So I was there. I stopped by the meadery a couple weeks ago and sat out on the patio and had a glass of this. So this is my second time having it, and yes, it does taste like pink lemonade.
Wow, I've never
Yeah.
had mead that tastes like pink lemonade before.
It is if you find a good meadery, they're doing. I mean, there are a lot of places doing really incredible things, and the flavors are not maybe what people would expect. So
Yeah.
so cheers.
Cheers.
All right. So what's new with you? What's happening in your life these days? How are you dealing with this sort of not really post-COVID, but post-vaccine world? What's been going on?
Well, I just came from Santa Fe, actually. I got back 2 days ago, Sunday. Yes, 2 days ago now. Yeah. Sorry, it's been a whirlwind, and I'll tell you why in a second. We drove out to Santa Fe to see the Desert Chorale in their summer season. They performed a work of mine, Brothers of the Sea, in their East Meets West concert. I got to meet some of my colleagues, friends in the group who are singers, and got to meet new people. Of course, they had very strict COVID protocols, so that was the shame of it, is we couldn't really hang out. But I got to see them after the concert in the backstage area. Everyone was masked and distanced and stuff like that. Got to say hi to Josh Haberman, and that was such a treat because I remember for the first time listening to groups like Santa Fe Desert Chorale or Conspirare or Seraphic Fire, and it's always been, as a composer, I feel like if you're living in the US, then it's just such a dream to have a group like that perform a work of yours, because they're just so excellent and so dedicated to the choral craft so it was such a treat to be there. Drove there, stopped by Flagstaff. On the way back, I popped a tire while I was driving 80 miles an hour. I'm okay, thankfully nothing. It could have gone a lot worse, honestly.
Yeah.
I could have been, when I swerved to the right, I could have been hit by a car. My car could have been totaled. I brought my car to the shop today to get it fixed, so it'll be there for a couple of weeks, but that's sort of the latest. I've had a quite busy year actually in the pandemic, because of my church job. When I'm director of music at a Unitarian Universalist church here in Santa Monica as well, and when we shut down, we immediately pivoted to all virtual stuff. As someone who has some experience mixing and doing remote recordings, it wasn't really too difficult for me to do that. My choir was small enough. I also had professional singers who could sing for me and do all that stuff. But our season ended at the end of June. So after a year of doing that, I was exhausted.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I also music coordinated the UU General Assembly, which is our national conference, and that was that ended in June too. And so the past couple of months has just been me traveling, resting, composing. It's I only have time to really devote to composing. And it's starting to pick up again, so also preparing for the fall.
Yeah,
that's sort of the latest.
Yeah,
in the world.
I was going to ask you about the pop tire. Were you in the desert at that point, or were you? I mean, I know it's hot depending on where you were, my family lives in Las Vegas, and so I always get the report about how crazy hot it is out there.
That might have been a factor in the popping of the tire, no? The heat.
I don't
Yes.
know.
I was in the desert. I was 11 miles out of Needles, California. For those of you who know where that is, it's on the I-40. It's on the border of Arizona, and I was driving on my way back from Flagstaff. And I still had 350 miles more to go before Los Angeles. So
yeah,
that was kind of crazy.
That sounds miserable, but yeah, I had seen that you were out in Santa Fe and was kind of keeping posted on social media and seeing how that you weren't the only person out there. So I saw it, several people's feeds about what was going on. So it's nice to see good quality performances going on in person, even though it's difficult and it's not like it normally is. And, it's not the same, but it's nice to see real performances happening. Not that virtual performances aren't real, but you know what I mean? It's a different thing. And everybody's doing what they have to do during the last, year and a half. But the virtual choir thing is, it's been tough. And I think we're all ready for in-person live performances with audiences and everything else.
I mean, on the other hand of that, I actually it's tough to do it weekly, 100%. Like weekly mixing the hymns and everything, compiling remote recordings from everywhere and tracks and just putting them together, putting the videos together is really tough. But on the other hand, I also cherish the possibilities, the opportunities that it afforded us, this being digital. I mean, I only have, 3 other professional singers, and in a normal situation, of course, they can only sing one at a part, and now we multi-track and we can do all these cool stuff. And so yeah, it's very tiring, but I just try to see the silver lining in everything and the opportunity. Where is the opportunity in this bad situation? I popped my tire. Wow, okay, it's an opportunity for me to learn how to change my own tires.
Yeah. And did you?
You know what? The funny thing is, the highway patrol officer told me that he will help me change my tires when all he did was instruct me on how to do it.
Well, that's still probably helpful.
It was very helpful because I would otherwise not know how to do it, but I thought he would actually physically help me.
Yeah, not quite, I guess. Well, good. I want to learn a little bit about you and your background, and I'm sure that people may know you, know your music, and have read a bio about you, but maybe we'll get some more background detail. Can you tell us when and where you were born?
I was born in Manila, Philippines, in 1988. I'm a 3rd generation Filipino Chinese, so I'm ethnically Chinese, but was born and raised in the Philippines, and my parents were born and raised in the Philippines. My grandfather moved to the Philippines when he was 16. From southern China, from Fujian. And yeah, I've lived there. I know the language there more than, although I also speak a little bit of Mandarin. I'm out of practice, unfortunately. I speak Hokkien, which is the dialect, Southern Chinese dialect, with my grandparents, and I speak a mishmash. I'm not unique to this though. Whole Chinese, Filipino Chinese community of my generation does this, to the disappointment of our grandparents. Oftentimes it's usually a combination of Tagalog, which is Filipino, Tagalog, English, and Hokkien. And so I always grew up trilingual, but it's really more of a jack of all trades, master of none situation, especially in the Chinese part of it because,
Yeah.
I mean, growing up, it just didn't seem cool.
Huh.
Which is so weird. Like, I went to a Chinese school. Everyone can speak Chinese. We would speak Chinese a little bit, but most of the time we'd speak Tagalog or English.
Yeah.
There's now a weird realization of why, well,
Yeah.
I mean, like,
I mean, I obviously know nothing about that experience because I grew up speaking English and that was it, and not even really hearing much of anything else. So I can't even imagine trying to process 3 languages.
well, here's a comparison that I make a lot. It's similar to the Jewish community here in like American Jewish community. They may know how to speak Hebrew, but they don't speak Hebrew with each other 100% of the time.
Sure.
A lot of the time, it's like a combination of English and Hebrew, right? So
Yeah.
for us, it's a combination of Tagalog and Hokkien, which is the dialect, and English.
Yeah. What are your parents' names?
So my mom is named Elisa, and my dad is named Sherwin, and they are business people.
Say that again. They're
business people. So
yeah, I was going to ask.
they run a food business, and growing up, I was always primed for that. My brother, they run an food import industry company that distributes imported goods to supermarkets and restaurants. So I always grew up around good food. My parents would bring me and my brother to food conventions like Cial in Paris, or the Anuga in Germany, or like the Chicago Food Show, or like the Massachusetts Seafood Show, etc. Make us wear business suits as kids and make us carry all the brochures, which was not fun. But you know what was fun? The free tasting of the different foods from the various.
That sounds amazing.
I mean, there were commercial foods. Like, obviously, they're trying to sell you something. Like, here, import our food. But I enjoyed that, and it really widened my food palette as a kid.
Yeah. I mean, free food is free food for one thing. I think people will lower their expectations if they're getting it for free, right? So free always makes it taste a little better. But that sounds incredible.
I certainly enjoyed it. I enjoyed being exposed to all of these. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into that industry because I wanted to be a musician. And I'm kind of glad I did, because if you haven't worked in a family business before, then you probably won't understand. But, I think for me, at least, the fact that we're in different industries made my relationship with my parents a lot better.
Sure.
Because if I worked under the company that they were leading, or under a business that they were leading, then I feel like that would have harbored a lot of resentment, even if I was into what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's not unique to me. I think that's unique to all family businesses.
Yeah. So it sounds like they early on maybe thought that's what you were going to do, or hoped that's what you were going to do. Were they were they musical? What was your musical experience like growing up? Because obviously you ultimately decided that music was the field you wanted to go into. Was that something that they fostered early on for you?
So kind of, to go back to that first part of that, of your comment, that experience is not unique to me. It's sort of that Filipino Chinese community all have businesses, all have family businesses. You want to pass your business from one generation to the other, et cetera, et cetera. So you kind of train your kids or prime your kids to be in that industry. Growing up, I started singing when I was 7, started voice lessons when I was 7, because my You know how it is when all of your cousins live in the same city as you, and and your aunt talks to your mom and says like, "Oh, I enrolled my kids to this, that."
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh, what if I enroll my kid too?" And
Yeah.
so some of my cousins were enrolled in voice lessons and piano lessons, and then so my mom enrolled me there too, and I just took to it really.
Hmm.
Uh, when my voice started to change, my teacher, my music teacher, also happens to be a composer and a pianist, and so I started learning piano and started learning music theory and started arranging at that time.
Wow.
Now, growing up in our household, we so my grandparents had a piano at their place, but in our apartment, um, I didn't have a piano. So my parents decided to buy a keyboard for me. And so my main instrument really growing up was a Korg Triton LE 88. It was a pretty good keyboard. I mean, it was like,
Sounds like the one I have upstairs.
I mean, before the Nord came out, it was
Yeah.
like one of the best keyboards out there, the Korg Triton, right? Like it had
Yeah.
multiple sounds. And so one of the first things that my composition teacher had me do is to make karaoke tracks for pop songs through the inside sequencer,
Yeah.
and the keyboard, and they were
Yeah.
like channels. You could layer the drums and the bass and the piano and the strings and all that jazz. And so a lot of that is sort of my first venture into writing. And of course, I was singing in choir at that time too. So, and I was a vocalist. And so I started arranging for choir, arranging pop music for choir. Um, and that's really how everything started. That's really how everything started for me.
Yeah. And were there, I mean, were these arrangements getting performed by the choir you sang in or other choirs in the area?
It was being performed by the high school choir that I was in, for
Wow.
sure. I wrote a couple of initial arrangements for them. I was also sometimes their pianist, and I was also sometimes an assistant conductor in that choir. I was just one of those people who can read music, and so the choir director relied on me, or tried to foster that in me.
Yeah.
And then when I was growing up, also, when I was in high school, while I was doing choir, while I was doing composition, um, I also played in a Chinese orchestra. So I went to a Chinese high school,
Mm.
and my mom's sister and her husband, so my aunt and uncle, played in a Chinese orchestra. And they were like, "Oh, we really want people who can read notes to join." And so I played percussion, and at some point I learned cello. Not very long for the
Yeah.
cello. I sort of learned it I sort of went to lessons for a year, and that was it. And I was out of that school. And so I'm not very good at it. Uh, I will definitely not claim that I can play it, but taught me how to write for strings.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's more than most people have, right? If you've played a little percussion and a little bit of cello and you play piano and you sing, I mean, a lot of people don't have opportunities to play that many instruments, especially at a reasonably high level, right? I mean, some people might like, oh, I played flute in fourth grade and then I switched to clarinet in fifth grade. That flute maybe wasn't a very high level experience for them. And so it sounds like you had reasonable experiences with
Well,
several
high
things.
level is a way to put it.
Well, in that you were being fostered by um, other good musicians, right? I mean, if there were people playing in some kind of orchestra as adults, they had to be reasonably good, and if they're the ones fostering your cello, I assume that that's maybe a little bit higher than what what some people would have on the instrument.
It's a community Chinese orchestra. You know, there are just a bunch of friends who my high school was big on Chinese culture.
Mhm.
So apart from Chinese dance troops, which was my mom was part of, um, we also had a Chinese orchestra with Chinese instruments, like traditional Chinese instruments. And it was like a thing that they did as a community. And these are sort of like the alumni players of that school. You know, they're
Mm.
not necessarily professional musicians, but they played in high school in this orchestra. They know how to play a little bit. And so there was a lot of love in that group. There was a
Sure.
lot of love, a lot of volunteer time, a lot um of financing, personal financing for
Hmm.
like ringers, and it was a community group. So the playing might not be like too high level, but I definitely appreciate the experience that I had with that. And of course, my aunt and uncle were there too, so it's not like I'm away from family.
Yeah.
I really cherished that experience. I feel like it made me a better musician for sure.
Yeah. And so when and how maybe does this sort of translate from a thing that you do, right? Because I think in high school, even if we think maybe we're going to major in music or that's what we're going to do as a career, it's not a career for most people in high school, right? It's a thing we do with all the other things we do. When did you become what you did? I mean, when did you start to transition from this student to a professional? I assume that's somewhere in the college time, and what did that look like for you?
So actually, it was in high school for me. I was in junior year. I was part of the choir. I was composing for the choir. I was part of the orchestra, and I really wanted to get into composition and choral conducting. But of course, like my parents being business people, they were very resistant to that at first. So they were like, "Oh, get another degree first,
Mm.
something that is business related." And so I went to De La Salle University, Manila, and I got a degree in communication arts there. So I actually have a degree in communication arts. As soon as I graduated high school, though, my high school had an annex campus in another part of town, and they also have a choir. And their choral conductor quit at that time. And so the high school hired me to do that. So I was doing that part time through college. And it was also in college where I joined the Philippine Madrigal Singers, which
Mhm.
I think is one of the most fundamental and recurring themes in my musical journey, because I really owe a lot to that group. My experience in that group as a singer and as one of the resident composer arrangers really fostered who I am as a composer today. We got to tour around the world and sing in different festivals and competitions. I got exposed to all these different types of choral music. And of course, those things, they live in your ear, they live in your mind,
Mhm.
they influence who you are, and they influence your perception of what's possible with vocal
Mhm.
music. Uh, and so that, I think, of course, I finished my degree in the Philippines, my communication degree, and my parents told me, if you finish this degree and you still want to do music, then go for it. And so my last year on tour with the Philippine Madrigal Singers, it was a North and South American tour. I actually took that opportunity to apply to Berklee College of Music, and I got accepted. And by the next year, I was in Boston doing my undergraduate degree in music. And then after that, I went to USC as a master's student. I would say that when I was in Boston, I got my first piece published with Earth Songs, which is Leron Leron Sinta. It's an arrangement of a Philippine folk song that I wrote for the Philippine Madrigal Singers. And that, I guess, is when it started.
Mm.
When sort of my life as a professional musician started. Of course, with any music gig, you really start from the bottom. I was doing uh, I was doing commissions and arrangements and arranging gigs for what, $100, $200 at that time, sometimes even nothing. But I think like that's really how you start, and you build momentum through that.
Sure.
And but it was something. Hey.
Yeah. So I want to shortly get into some of your music, because I have to tell you, I didn't know a lot of your music until I was getting ready to ask you to be part of the show. I knew your name, like I knew of you and knew a lot of people that liked your music, but I just I've still never had an opportunity to perform it as a singer. I have not been able to program it. It's been one that's I've been ready to program, and then things happen, and there's a lot of good music out there. But I'm so excited about your music, so we're going to talk about your music.
Okay.
But first, we're going to play a little game, and I didn't tell you we were going to do this, and so we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
But because our sponsor was Four Fires Metering, we're going to play a game called Fire, Not Fire. And I'm going to give you some things. I'll give you tell you a topic, and you're going to tell me if you think that thing is fire or not fire.
Oh no. Okay.
and I may ask some follow-up questions.
Okay.
Does that work? Okay.
Sure.
So this is Fire, Not Fire with Saunder Choi. A good cup of coffee.
Fire.
And I wanted to follow up. How do you like your coffee? Are you a slow pour over kind of guy, or do you like the latte? Are you a more florid kind of coffee person?
I'm definitely a pour over type of person. Single origin is the best, but I've been getting more and more into espresso lately. So macchiatos, something with less milk, like cortados or macchiatos are great. There's a great Cuban place around the corner from us that has Cafe Cubano, which is the Cuban espresso.
Yeah.
And that's really good. It's very good.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
cup of
cold brew. Yeah.
Cup of coffee, fire. Good. A day at the beach.
Fire.
And as a person in California, Southern California, do you get out to the beach very often?
So no, and I'm going to tell you why. Because there's a difference between California beaches and Philippine beaches. And as an archipelago who grew up in the tropics, surrounded by islands upon islands, we have some of the best beaches in the world. Not only is the sand super fine and super white, but the waves are not out there to kill you. It's like imagine how peaceful a lake is and how gentle the waves are at a lake. So that's the type of beach environment that I grew up with. Blue water, clear, crystal, you can see the bottom, white sand, lots of coral sometimes. And the California beaches are just not like that. I mean, they're beautiful, but they're frigid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, compared to what I was used to growing up, which is like, tropical water. Speaking of my drink, Boracay, Tanduay. Boracay is an island in the Philippines. If you want a good time, you should check it out after the pandemic. But
yeah,
that's the type of that I grew up in, that I grew up going to. Boracay, Palawan, Batangas. So very similar to the beaches in Hawaii, probably.
Yeah, cool. Fast food.
Oh, God, not fire.
Okay, but what's the guilty pleasure that has you teetering there?
Jack in the Box curly fries.
There you go. I knew it must be something. You were having an inner struggle.
Well, also my boyfriend loves fast food.
Yeah.
He loves fast food. But also, I love Jollibee. It's a Filipino fast food place. I
Mm.
think it has the best chicken, fried chicken,
Yeah.
better than Popeyes. Um, but also it's more of like a cultural thing. Like I feel like every Filipino that you talk to here has an attachment to Jollibee,
Yeah.
even if you know that it's fast food.
Yeah.
You know? And that was the internal struggle with that. Is
I
because
see.
I do love Jollibee. I mean, I like crave it once in a while, and I
Yeah.
have it once in a while. And thankfully, here in LA, I live like less than a mile from one in Koreatown.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I think fast food for a lot of people is about nostalgia, right? It has something to do with, it was a treat when you were younger.
Mm.
And so there's something about um, fast food, especially if you can't get it where you are as an adult.
Mm.
Right. I grew up in Illinois and then moved to Las Vegas, and there were certain places that I could get in Vegas that I couldn't get in Illinois, and vice versa. And so then whenever I was on one part of the country or the other, I would kind of crave whatever I couldn't have, even though I know it's not great food. But it's connected to memory.
What is a fast food place that you like?
Well, I mean, now that I'm in Ohio, I miss In-N-Out, because I moved to Vegas and then I could get In-N-Out. I can't have that here. And um, I don't have Jack in the Box here either. And I
Really?
ate Jack in the Box in high school a lot. So those are ones that I kind of think about now. And there are Jack in the Boxes around ish, but just not in town.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's just one of those things that it's connected to certain experiences and then makes you crave it, I think.
So here's my hot take as a California person, a person living in California. Um, but first of all, do you consider Shake Shack a fast food joint?
Yeah, I would say so.
So I think that Shake Shack's burger is 100% better than In-N-Out. I'm
I
so sorry, Californians, but it's the truth. It just is. Like New York wins this round.
I like Shake Shack too. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't, but I don't have that here either. So yeah.
I choose like I can't even remember the last time I went to In-N-Out, and it's so available here, you know.
Yeah.
I can remember the last time I went to Shake Shack.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, I get a few more of these. Binging on Netflix, fire or not fire?
Fire, 100%. I love TV.
Good. We'll circle back. I'll ask you about TV and binging a little bit later. I'm sure I know the answer to this one already, but living in LA.
Fire.
Yeah. Hip hop music.
Fire. Fire.
Okay.
But
Uh,
but like the true ones, like not Hamilton. You know what I mean?
yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. On the opposite side of things, maybe country music.
Uh, I'm gonna have to say not fire.
Yeah. You're not going to offend me with that.
I did not grow up with it. It's just a genre that I don't really understand.
Sure.
It's telling a lot of stories that I don't relate to as someone who did not grow up here or did not grow up in the Midwest.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I grew up in the Midwest and I don't much relate to it either. So, how about snow?
Fire.
You like snow?
I actually really enjoyed my time in Boston. I
Yeah.
mean, granted, during the few years that I was there was no major snowstorm or anything that shut it down. But it was new to me. I mean, when I first moved to the US, almost 10 years ago now, actually, 2012, January 2012. So I'm reaching my 10th year anniversary living in this country.
There you go.
I moved in the middle of winter from a tropical country. And I haven't I hadn't lived outside the Philippines at that point. It's my first time living outside the Philippines. And I moved to Boston from the Philippines, and it was in the dead of winter. And for some reason, I didn't really mind it.
Hmm.
But then I know how to layer. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I imagine you were living in a dorm or an apartment and you didn't have to shovel a driveway.
Yes, I did
Yeah.
not have to do that 100%.
Because as soon as you have to shovel your own driveway, you may change your mind about snow.
Yeah, although I've been living in apartments my whole life, and
Yeah.
to some extent, I actually prefer it because there's a concierge, there's maintenance
Sure.
that you don't need to do yourself. I mean, a really good apartment for me with the right amenities is sort of like it's fine. It's fine
Yeah.
for like
Yeah.
I don't yearn to do my own yard work or clean my own garage or to fix my own pipes or hire my own, I like the convenience of, and this may be the urban boy in me, but I grew up in a big city my whole life. It's Manila, it's Boston, and it's LA. All of these are big cities that where apartment living is more common. And in a way, I actually really enjoy the convenience of living in an apartment.
Yeah. I think for most people that own a home, it's a love-hate relationship with all of those things, right? I don't necessarily love doing my own yard work, but do take some pride in having having it done nicely. So yeah, I think a love-hate relationship. All right, I have two more fire, not fire. Sushi.
Fire, 100%.
I go halvesies on sushi. Sometimes I love it and sometimes I kind of pass on it.
My parents, especially my dad's favorite type of food is Japanese food. And Japanese, fresh seafood is very common in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the things that is like maybe 5 times as expensive here in the US. But if you go back home, you can get fresh shrimp, fresh fish for very little, actually. It's not that expensive back home. I mean, of course, we're islands. We're surrounded by ocean. We're surrounded by fish. But I've loved fresh fish my whole life and fresh seafood. So actually moving to Boston was such a treat for me because between the lobster and the oysters, and it was great. I loved it. And I continue to love fresh seafood and Japanese food in general. Actually, sushi is
nice.
Wonderful.
All right, the last one, I already know your answer for this because you kind of beat me to the punch on this, but vaccines.
Fire, 100%.
I mean,
yeah.
let's get it together, people. Cool. All right. Well, that was a game of Fire, Not Fire, presented by Four Fires Meadery. Thank you for indulging me in our little rapid fire game there. Okay, friends, I want to take a minute to tell you about the sponsor for today's episode, Four Fires Meadery. First meadery in Toledo, they are making some absolutely incredible stuff. And the good news is that even if you can't drop in for a few glasses, you can have the mead shipped directly to your door. I am not sure I can imagine a more exciting package to open. Right now, on their website, you can order things like Mangost, a mango pineapple honey wine with ghost peppers added. The ghost peppers might sound kind of intense, but the sweet and heat are amazingly well balanced. Or maybe a bottle of Little Pink Lawn Chair. This is their strawberry, raspberry, and lemon mead to give you a taste of pink lemonade in the summer year-round. I had a glass of this on their patio a couple of weeks ago, and, well, it's the perfect summer beverage. If you want to try some, visit them on the web at 4fmeadery.com and order a bottle today. They're shipping nationwide, and you don't want to miss out. Again, that is the number 4fmeadery.com to order your bottle today. I also hope you will show them some support on social media at Four Fires Meadery on Instagram. It's a great follow. Buy some mead. You won't regret it. And now, back to the conversation. All right. So you all through high school are doing musical things and already getting paid to do musical things. And you do an undergrad degree not in music, but now you've done an undergrad degree in at Berkeley, and you've gone to LA and done a master's, and people are performing your music at this point, right? I mean, you finished the master's and you've got some pretty big choirs performing your stuff, right?
Well, it's been 4 years since I finished my master's, so it was definitely a journey to get there. I would say that, again, going back to the Philippine Madrigal Singers, that group has a huge influence in the Philippines and the entirety of Asia. So throughout my master's, I've been getting commissions. I wrote a piece called Ang Tren, the train, for the Andrea o Veneracion International Choral Festival in the Philippines. And several choirs from other countries competed in that, and they all had to sing that piece. So I've been receiving commissions like that when I was a student. I've been receiving small commissions from choirs, like arrangements here and there, orchestration work. I really like to do a lot of things musically. And so I find it very hard to say no to a gig, actually. Like, if I can do it, I'll do it. I'm not the type of person who just gives up a gig or an offer easily. So I'm like, I say yes to everything, because in a way, I think I may have FOMO a little bit. I want to be, yeah, just a little bit, I think. Yeah.
Well, tell me about with that commission, did they give you were there specifics or parameters that you had to follow? And what led you to this piece that's really rhythmic and really, has these super cool kind of imitative train sounds? And it's a great piece. What led you to create the piece that you created with that commission?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. Let's talk about the choosing of the text first. Of course, in Philippine choral music, there are, I would say, almost three prongs to Philippine choral music. Generally, when I was singing in the Philippine Madrigal Singers, there's like three major prongs. There's sacred, which typically means it's like either Catholic text, Christian text, either in local Filipino languages, or in Latin, or in English. So that's one prong. Then there are folk songs, arrangements of folk songs that are of Spanish origin. So these are your kundimans, which are art songs. It's sort of like the habanera form. And our patriotic music, a lot of it is composed in a very, definitely you hear the influence of Spanish music there and Spanish music styles. And then the third one is the indigenous folk music, which are, music like Mamayog Akin or Ko Yunata Belul by Yudanis Palaruan. So those are the three things. And one thing that I haven't noticed is that there's not a lot of setting of secular poetry. And so Jose Corazon de Jesus, or his nickname is Kuseng Batute. In fact, he has a theater in the Cultural Center of the Philippines that's named after him, the Hussein Batute Theater. It's the middle-sized theater. And as the Philippine Madrigal Singers, we were resident artists of the CCP, not the Communist Chinese Party, but the Cultural Center of the Philippines. We perform in that hall a lot. And the Philippines also has a tradition of national artists. So we have national artists for literature, national artists for music, national artists for visual painting, whatever. And Jose Corazon de Jesus is one of those national artists. So since that award is usually granted by the Cultural Center of the Philippines, since the Cultural Center of the Philippines is one of the co-commissioners of this, apart on top of the Philippine Madrigal Singers, I thought that it would be nice, and I at that time I really wanted to promote secular poetry settings of Philippine choral music. And so I started researching poems. And of course, Jose Corazon de Jesus is one of the people that I talked to, that I found, or whose works I started exploring rather.
Right.
I knew who he is, but I started exploring his works, and I found Ang Tren. Got drawn to the poetry. Onomatopoeia, that imitation of sounds, it's not new. And like, I did not invent that, of course. We hear that in Renaissance music, but we hear that in a lot of Asian polyphonic music as well. You have a lot of Indonesian choral music, a lot of Philippine choral music that imitate gong sounds, for example, imitating our indigenous instruments, like the kulintang, or in Indonesia, the gamelan ensemble. You have Philippine choral music that imitate bamboo instruments from the north. And then we have a lot of course, in the Philippine Madrigal Singers, there's a huge tradition of arranging pop music as well. So there's a little bit of that imitative, like imitating instruments, like a cappella groups imitate a lot of instruments. So that's sort of where the onomatopoeia tradition of writing this kind of music stems from. And it seems to be an idiom, a writing style that a lot of Southeast Asian choirs understand very much. Yeah, I mean that's how Ang Tren was composed. That piece has been living. I actually orchestrated it. There's an orchestral version of that called Locomotion that I wrote for the Portuguese Philharmonic Orchestra. It was a pandemic premiere.
Nice.
It was premiered in Portugal in December of 2020. And right now I'm writing a wind band transcription piece. But yeah, that's sort of the story of Ang Tren. A choir from the Philippines, the UANP Chorale, actually performed it in the Bali International Virtual Choral Festival that happened last year. And I think they did one of the most intense virtual choir videos out there. It's really a spectacle. Like, oh my gosh, the video was so extra in the best sense.
All right.
We had these train carriages, and then the train was like moving all around, and then each carriage had like a person's face in it
Oh
singing.
my.
I was like, wow, they went all out here.
I'm gonna have to look that up as soon as we're done here. I'm fascinated. Well, I want to talk about another piece of yours, and I'll tell you, I made some notes on your music because I wanted to make sure that I didn't mix up pieces. And I want to ask you about New Colossus. And I'll tell you that the first thing that I have written after the title is in all capital letters, a big bold wow. I was so taken by that piece, and I just think it is absolutely stunning. And so I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the piece and about where it came from.
Well, thank you so much. I wrote that piece back in, I believe, 2017 or 2018. I can't remember. But it was for the Western Division ACDA. A group that I sing with, the LA Choral Lab, was performing there, was set to perform there. And Michael wanted to do a premiere, so he commissioned me for a piece. And of course, at that time, we were in the middle of the like whole Trump thing. I had just gotten approved for my first artist visa here. And it was such an ordeal to get that. So immigration is always a topic that's going to be close to my heart because it's part of my journey here. I had to fight to stay here, you know. I went through the whole thing. And when Trump became president, all of it just became a lot harder. And it was a constant need of having to prove my self-worth as an artist to the government, basically showing them programs and awards and, you know, recommendation letters and how much I earn and all of that stuff I had to show just to prove that I can stay here. And so New Colossus, I was attending a CrossFit gym in downtown LA at that time on 7th and Hill. And one of the murals in downtown LA had the Statue of Liberty and had the Emma Lazarus text, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses." Because also of its proximity to Skid Row, of course, that was really referring to, or in the context of downtown LA, I think it was mostly referring to the homeless population. Because homelessness is unfortunately one of the ugly problems that we have here in Los Angeles. Los Angeles being such a vibrant city, but for some reason it's unable to solve the problem of homelessness. And it's just gotten worse and worse these days. But that's really how I came to choose that. I came to choose that text. Growing up here, not growing up here in the US, of course, like we weren't really exposed to the text on the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I mean, seeing that, I was like, that would be a great text to set. And so I went on to compose it.
Yeah.
Of course.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say that it's sort of like a culmination of my musical experiences at that time. I love pop music. I also like rhythm. And I also listen to a lot of contemporary choral music. So a lot of those folded into that piece.
You use actual physical inhalation and exhalation, the sound of breathing throughout the piece, and it is a rhythmic device, right? I mean, it's used functionally as rhythm throughout the piece, but obviously has a lot of subtext to the way that people are breathing. It is not a breath, it's not a calm breathing throughout the piece. It is a breath that maybe has struggle behind it, or has need behind it. It has an affect to it. And I'm listening to the piece, and you physically feel this breath moving through the piece, and then you get to the end of the song, and there is the full big breath in, and it's just held, and then there's that release of air at the end. And I just thought that was such a poetic way to end the piece, because it really is fascinating how that text by Emma Lazarus is at once very patriotic and also reflective of the struggle of those of us who maybe aren't feeling quite as patriotic as we would like to in 2021. So maybe I don't know if you can briefly kind of tell us about what made you put the actual act of breathing into the score, and what did that represent for you?
Well, for me, it's very simple. That represented panting for me. So when you just finished a workout that's hard, or when you just ran a mile, you're generally gasping for breath and panting, and that for me is an audible symbol of being tired. And so, tired and yearning to breathe free, those are the two words that I was trying to really paint with the gasping and the panting, really. Yeah, and of course it's very textural and very rhythmic. And there's a way to do it, as I have learned, because the first time I wrote that, during the first rehearsal, when we just did that, we were all very lightheaded after. Yeah. And so we had to cheat it a little bit by like clenching our teeth, and then it makes a little bit more sound if you do. Sure. And you don't inhale as much oxygen to your head, and it doesn't make you hyperventilate.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, so that's sort of a unique position to be in, because you were singing in the group, that you were writing the piece for. And so then obviously you're in every rehearsal, but not conducting the piece. And by the way, for anybody who may not know, you've got a lovely voice, and they'll see you if they go to your website in a lot of the performances that are on your website. But also, they should give you a follow on Instagram. And there's some solo singing on the gram, so they can definitely hear you sing. So what was it like? How involved were you in the rehearsal process then of this piece? Was it collaborative? Were you building the piece a little bit as it went, refining the piece, or did you just turn it over to the conductor and say it's yours now?
There were little edits during the rehearsal for sure, but I wouldn't say that we workshopped the piece really. In terms of singing in a group that I'm writing for, it's something that a lot of resident composers and arrangers in the Philippine Madrigal Singers have done. Because whenever we write for that group, most of the time we're singing in that group as well.
Right.
And so I've had that experience ever since, of writing and singing in the group, ever since I was in high school, really, because I arranged for the high school choir that I sang in. And so that dichotomy of that performer composer model is something that I'm very comfortable living in. And I feel like being a performer and a composer makes me understand a performer's need. And so whenever I write for choirs, I try to have more apathy, or to be more mindful of the need of the performers. Because like for me, I know what's tiring, I know what's not fun to sing. And apart from making a good sound, I really want the performers to have a good time performing my piece.
Yeah. Well, anybody who performs that piece is going to have a great time. It's awesome. It's a great piece of music. I know. So New Colossus then was written for a specific performance with a specific group in mind. But as you continued writing music, it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you kind of, it naturally evolved into being a part of a set of music. And the last of those pieces in the set, where I guess maybe you knew now these go together and this puts the cap on it, is a piece called Invitation to Love, which is also gorgeous. And we'll play a little bit of it in the podcast, but it opens with this beautiful soprano solo, duet, which is mostly in thirds, but kind of moving between major thirds and minor thirds in a way that somehow makes it sound like there's more going on than there is.
Come when the nights are bright with stars, or come when the moon is mellow. Come when the sun, its golden bars, drops on the hayfield yellow, 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 yellow. Come in the twilight soft and gray. Come in the night or in the day. Come, O love, when I am
I wrote Invitation to Love as an entry to the King Singers New Music Prize. And they basically had 6 sets of text, I believe, that you can choose from. And I chose that one. Paul Laurence Dunbar, I feel, is a very underrated poet of his time because of the obvious reasons of systemic racism and, Black communities in America not having the same opportunities that white communities have at that time, or even now. Actually, let's be honest, it never really got to that level of being equal. And so I was drawn to that poetry, and that invitation for me then translated as sort of like a come invitation, come. So I tried to recontextualize it to more like immigration focused, because at the end of the day, we move because of need. And I feel like communities are formed, or communities should be formed out of love. And so that invitation to love is that's how I chose to see it. Is sort of like welcoming that stranger, welcoming the other, welcoming someone else in your community who might be different, who might have grown with a different set of values, because at the end of the day, that's really what we're trying to do here in this world, is create unity among people. Unity in this diverse fabric of life.
I want to ask you about one other piece, and I'm actually going to read, if you don't mind, from your website about this piece, because I'm sure you'll be able to expand on this. So I want to talk about American Breakfast, and so I'm going to read this little blurb here, and then have you talk about it. The function of American Breakfast is to reflect on the transformation of an abnormal occurrence into a daily one. The events at Pulse in Orlando would have at one time challenged the assumptions once held dear about America's tolerance and relative security. But now the basic assumption is this: an American day will include gun violence. This is a piece about accepting the parameters of a forced American ritual, one in which we must partake, even if we succumb to numbness or deny its reality. So the line that you've written in those notes about the assumption, right? An American day will include gun violence, was really striking to me. And this will be the second piece, actually, in over the course of this podcast that we'll have talked about with a composer related to the shooting at the Pulse nightclub. In our second episode, I had Joshua Shank on, and he did an arrangement of House of the Rising Sun, and was in response to what happened in Orlando. So unfortunately, or fortunately, we've had great composers writing about this, and unfortunately we have to keep talking about it. But I guess I want to start by asking, when you're responding to an event that has happened in life that obviously has such a visceral impact on people and on you as a person, how is that different for you from writing another piece? So, any other commission or any other piece that you might write, how is responding to this moment in time different?
I don't think it's different at all, because a lot of my works are responses to what's happening in the moment. And that's, I've just sort of taken that approach. While some people write music as an escape, I really want music to be a snapshot of the time that I lived in. And I feel like American Breakfast is one of those. Of course, New Colossus, and the way I chose to compose New Colossus. I mean, obviously, it's very different from the Irving Berlin setting of the New Colossus.
Sure.
It's sort of a snapshot of the time that we're living in. I wrote another piece called Welcome Table. I wrote a piece a few years ago called Verum Corpus, which is about trans rights or the transgender narrative. And all of these are sort of like current. I like writing about current things. It's generally a snapshot of the time that I'm living in. And American Breakfast, sadly, is still applicable today because we have not really solved that problem of gun violence because we have politicians who are unwilling to make that step.
Semi-automatic. Semi-automatic. Lever set to fire. Lever. Semi-automatic. Lever. Fire.
Lever set to fire.
Lever. The trigger is squeezed.
Set to fire.
Semi-automatic is squeezed.
The trigger is
Lever.
squeezed.
Fire. The trigger is semi-automatic. The trigger.
The trigger. The trigger.
The trigger is squeezed. Semi-automatic.
The trigger rotates.
The trigger rotates.
The trigger rotates.
Semi-automatic. The lever.
The lever.
The trigger rotates.
The trigger. The lever.
Semi-automatic.
The trigger rotates.
The trigger rotates. Semi-automatic.
The trigger rotates.
The trigger rotates. Semi-automatic.
Fire. The trigger. The trigger rotates.
The trigger rotates. Semi-automatic.
Fire. The trigger.
The lever.
The trigger rotates. The trigger rotates.
The trigger rotates.
Time and time again, we've talked about how Australia's government has, bought guns from its citizens. And of course, people state the Constitution here as an excuse for that. And I just, I just don't understand it. I don't understand it. Just earlier this year, another attack. I mean, of course, I identify as gay, cisgendered gay man. So Pulse I was hurt by Pulse.
Yeah.
It felt like an attack on my identity. It felt like an attack on spaces that I would feel safe in, gay bars. But then earlier this year, you have the Atlanta shootings of Asian women. And again, that sparked the whole Stop Asian Hate movement, but that felt like a personal attack again. And it's a guy with a gun once more, very, very senseless killing. And you don't know where they get these. Like, how are they able to get these? Oh, wait. Oh, there's no regulation.
Yeah. How quickly after Pulse did you begin work on the piece? Was it something that you felt compelled to start writing quickly? I mean, were you just gripped by this and you immediately started work on it, or was there time passed and you were reflecting? How did that happen?
And pretty soon after, just because I was writing this for a summer workshop. So at that time, I was part of the Big Sky Choral Initiative with The Crossing. And I knew that I needed to write a piece for that and thought that this would be a good piece to write for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is different than some of the other pieces. It has multiple movements in it and uses speech and is not as melodic as some of the other pieces. But what I have quickly come to appreciate about your music is the often the immediacy of it. And you just commented about wanting music to be a snapshot of the time. And this is sort of, I love when themes kind of come together with people that I'm talking to when we don't do it on purpose. But this has sort of been thematic with several of the people that I've spoken to on the show, that choral music in particular, because it uses text, has at least an opportunity and maybe even a responsibility to reflect the moment.
Mhm.
And it does not owe people the intention of longevity. Meaning, I think that choral composers who write hoping that this piece stands the test of time and means something to people 100 years from now are sometimes missing the mark. And that the best art people are making right now are people that are making art for right now. And if a year from now that seems like an ancient memory, it was the moment that matters, because that's what our art is. When we go and we sit in a concert and we sing for people and with people and make music in the space with people, it's immediate. It's about the moment. And I love that so much of your music does that. And I also love, you seem to me to be an optimist, generally speaking, even though you're reflecting on a lot of things that are difficult or that you feel conflict or struggle with. You generally seem to be optimistic. Would you agree with that?
I think I try to find the silver lining. I'm a solutions focused guy. Like, I don't like dwelling on the bad. I'm all in it for finding solutions. And if that is optimism, then great. I wouldn't really call myself like a super, like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be okay. No, that, like, not that kind of optimism, but I would say that I'm solutions based generally. And speaking to the immediacy of things, I mean, I think Bach was political as well. At that time when he was a Lutheran, he was writing Protestant music amidst, like, a Europe that is largely Catholic. The fact that he reinvents a lot of, or comes up with all of these, like, different, when he wrote Well-Tempered Clavier, for example, I mean, I feel like that was political.
Yeah.
Right. When we were just intonation to a well-tempered tuning system, and he wrote that, and I don't know, I feel like that was political too.
I suspect that a lot of the music that we hold up in choral music and kind of put in the catalog, right? It's the classics of choral music, are more subversive or have more political content or have more immediacy to them than a lot of people today like to give them credit for. I think there are people that like to gloss over whatever that subtext is and strip it of that meaning because it makes them more comfortable.
Yeah.
And so, and then they reject current composers that are doing that, and they say, "Oh, well, why don't you just write music like Bach did?"
Yeah.
And you go, "Yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's the whole thing."
I think so too. I mean, I don't know, Britain, War Requiem, sort of Poulenc and his struggle between the sacred and the profane, and how he, because he was gay, he had boyfriends, and how he struggled with that and became political with his identity, or talked about his identity through his music. Of course, Britain did that too. I feel like all of those are political. I mean, even Schoenberg's choice to divert from traditional tonality, for example. I mean, of course, his teacher Mahler has been doing that, but the fact that he came up with this whole other system, I feel like that was like a political, that was like a like rage against what that's sort of like you're going against the system
Mm-hmm.
to advocate for something. And just thinking of spirituals too.
Hmm.
And the history of spirituals and what this music means. I feel like all these musics advocate for something in the immediate and in context in their time.
Yeah. Hey, we've gotten into good, important ideological conversation here. Let's shift gears. I want to ask you about some things that are not that at all. This is just some fun things. What's the thing that you're most recently binging on television?
What am I binging on television?
Or what's been the most exciting thing you've watched recently?
Oh, Centaur World.
I'm unfamiliar.
So Centaur World is this cartoon. I just happen to have friends who sang the background voices, but also the main cast is a lot of like Broadway singers.
Huh.
Like Megan Hilty and Kimiko Glenn and Lea Salonga. That was real fun. It's on
Okay.
Netflix.
I don't know it. I'll have to check it out.
It's a cartoon about a rider and a horse and how the horse suddenly goes into this world where everyone's like a type of centaur or a type of minotaur, and how she finds her way back into the real world, only to realize that she has to stay in Centaur World and fight the war from Centaur World. No spoilers.
Okay.
Or maybe I spoiled something. I don't know.
Yeah, they'll figure it out. What is your favorite meal in Los Angeles?
Oh my gosh, that's so hard.
I know. Well, I ask the hard-hitting questions. Come on.
I would say that you cannot leave LA without at least going to a single taco truck.
Mm.
Because I feel like that's in the DNA of LA.
Mm-hmm.
Korean food and Mexican food and taco trucks. Yes.
All right.
That's my answer. I would say like that's the constant. I mean, there's so much good food in LA. Don't get me wrong, but like taco trucks are a constant for me.
For sure.
Yeah.
Nice. Pop music, commercial music. Is there anybody you're listening to right now that you're excited about?
Well, my first concert out of the pandemic is Shoshana Bean at the Bourbon Room a couple of weeks ago. And Shoshana Bean is she just released an EP. I don't really know if you'd consider her pop. I mean, she does some musical theater, but she's sort of emerging as a pop R&B artist right now, in her identity, sort of veering away from that musical theater side. But I just think that she's an incredible vocalist.
Cool.
And I love her voice. I love her voice. She's so good.
Nice. I don't know her. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, she played. She was in Waitress. She was in Wicked at some point. Yeah.
Nice. Very cool. Well, Saunder, I've very, very much enjoyed getting the opportunity to meet you, to chat. I think that for anybody who doesn't know your music, they're going to fall in love when they hear it, because there's so much just really, really great stuff. And I think, and you write challenging music. And so there may be people listening, most of the pieces we talked about today are probably not suitable for say a high school choir. And so it's challenging music, and people may not know it because they've not looked at programming it. But it is lovely and timely and challenging, and I've been really taken with it. So thank you for the music, and thank you for sitting down to talk with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for this lovely opportunity to converse and share. And at the end of the day, that's what life is all about: sharing stories. So thank you for this time.
Yeah. Do you have a little bit of drink left?
Yes, I
Perfect.
do.
Good. Well, let's say cheers.
Cheers.
All right. Thank you for joining us for episode 9 of the Composer Happy Hour. Thank you to my guest, Saunder Choi. You can visit him on the web at saunderchoi.com, and there are several choral videos there that feature him singing. He's a very talented singer, and I think it provides a lot of insight to be able to watch a composer perform their own works. As always, we hope that you will rate and review this podcast wherever you happen to be listening, and consider sharing a link to your favorite episode on your preferred social media platform. Thank you again to our sponsor for the episode, Four Fires Meadery. Their meat is absolutely world-class, and you can have it delivered directly to your door by ordering at 4fmeadery.com. My guest next time is Eric Barnum, and we look forward to sharing a drink with you then. Thanks again, everyone. Cheers.